Good morning, everybody. Where are we here? Right in the middle. All right. So this past week, I have had you ever had one of those weeks where you feel like you have accomplished absolutely nothing? Where the entire time that you have been trying to work through things and get things accomplished, nothing has happened. This week was one of those weeks, to the point where yesterday I put a time limit for 1 p.m. so that if I was still struggling to get my sermon finished, or at least moving in a more positive direction, I was going to call Nathan. And as the Holy Spirit sometimes works, Nathan called me at 12:35, and we had a bit of a chat, which was great because it kind of got me back on task. I found myself reading and rereading and then writing and then rewriting the same thing over and over and over again because there was something that was blocking me from getting it done. And I think it was just the culmination of the entire week. This past week, I know for a lot of you people, including myself, a lot of Ontarians, it's been a little bit frustrating with some of the changes in lockdown procedures and all of that stuff. I even to the point where one of the things that I noticed this past weekend, the grade 8 grads, which my son Quentin is a grade 8 grad this year, are not getting to go on the yearly Ottawa trip that they always go on, which means that Quentin gets a sweater and kicked out the door from school. And I kind of felt a little bit bad. And one of the things that he said that he wanted to do was, because we've been fairly isolated, he wanted to know if we could buy a dirt bike. And I got lucky, and I found one that was really cheap, like $350 cheap. And the only thing it was missing was some brakes. Now, if you have ever ridden a dirt bike or a motorcycle or been on a car or on a scooter going down a hill, brakes are something that's actually really important. This didn't have any brakes, and I got it started and moving forward, but I had to jump off of it because there were no brakes. So, needless to say, I felt bad because we bought this thing and the kid can't ride it. So I got lucky online and found a company that sold these replacement brake parts and got them ordered in. They showed up Friday morning around 11 o'clock, and I got Quentin up and I said, hey, let's get in the car and let's go in and get these things on, and then look at that. You can have this dirt bike and you can ride it around this weekend, right? And I was like, victory, we have all the brand new parts. Except for the rear brake master cylinder was not working properly and there are no rear brakes. Hence, Quentin does not have a dirt bike to ride this week. So, even though I thought I had actually accomplished something wonderful and did something that was going to be really helpful for my kid and made him feel happy, because going into lockdown, he's not happy about that again, I ended up failing again. So I went home on Friday afternoon pretty dejected, and that carried into yesterday's sermon. Now, one of the things that I've learned over the years to try and get my brain working and get connected to what I'm trying to write again is I tend to throw some music on or a TV show on and just kind of get my brain out of the cycle that it's been focused on. And I was scrolling through the Disney Plus online there and came across this movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro in it called Men of Honor. And I know some of you have seen it. Obviously, I know Rob has seen it for sure because we've actually had this conversation just recently about this movie. So the movie actually talks about this guy named Carl Bashir, and he is the first African-American man to become a Navy diver. So the Navy divers were actually people that did a salvage and rescue deep underwater just after the World War II. So for him, it would have been 1948, 49. Okay. Now, obviously, Carl Bashir, being an African-American man coming into this area, he dealt with a level of racism that I know for myself personally, I can't even fathom. So part of the movie is him struggling with that. But about 35 minutes in, we hit this point where they're doing some training. They're on land, and they're doing some training, but they're wearing this suit. And without the helmet, the suit is still like 120 pounds. And then they have this brass helmet that goes on and gets all locked up. But they're in this training thing, they're in this suit, and they're blindfolded, and they have to take this pipe with two flanges, so it's like a big flange like this, and it's got holes in it for where bolts go, and there's a pipe that kind of sticks out the back end of it, and then they have another one that looks the same, and they have a gasket, and while blindfolded, wearing gloves, they have to bolt this together and accomplish this in a set period of time. Now, this is important for them because eventually they're going to have to pass the Navy diver test, they're going to have to pass this thing where they do something similar, 60 feet underwater on the bottom of this channel with 200 some odd pounds of gear on, in the dark, obviously, and it's only like 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. And the idea is that they're supposed to get this done in a certain amount of time. Now, Karl Bashir was good enough at his job, at his training, and all the testing that he actually didn't have, as long as he completed the project, he passed, and he was fine. So, anyways, he's 60 feet below in the dark, and he's trying to get this thing all together. And to be honest with you, like if I'm being honest, like this is kind of what I do for a living. I'm a mechanical guy. I'm very good with mechanical things. If it's broken, most times I can fix it. And often, if you're a friend of mine and you know me fairly well, I'm the guy that gets the phone calls to try and fix things that, other people have messed up. And I was thinking about this. I can't possibly imagine what it would be like to be 60 feet underwater trying to put together nuts and bolts after 9 hours, which is how long it took him to get this completed. You see, I feel like I would be in there like a moron, flailing around in the dark, trying to get things sorted out. And I kind of felt like that this week. Every time I thought I was getting somewhere, I think, to be honest with you, the only positive thing personally that I sat back and was like, okay, you've accomplished something today that's worthwhile. I made a really good soup on Tuesday night. That's the extent of what I felt like this past week. I felt that my soup was the pinnacle of my accomplishments for the week. My wife is probably in the comments section going, yeah, it was pretty good soup. At least I hope she is. So here's the truth. I have felt like this more often than not over the last year. And I've been up here preaching to you guys on several occasions about how we just need to see Jesus and all of that stuff. If I'm being honest, the truth is the more that I've looked, the harder it's been, and the angrier I've gotten at myself. The more I've looked, the angrier I've gotten at Jesus, because I feel like, Jesus, why have you just sorted all of this stuff out? Like, I feel like I started off directing my anger at him, and then I would feel guilty about being angry at Jesus. And then I would kind of go back, and then I get angry at myself for feeling guilty about being angry at Jesus. And then I feel guilty about being angry at myself. And I kind of felt like that flailing in the dark and trying to figure things out. And I think the hardest part for me was sitting back and kind of going, like, after everything that I've seen, everything that I've experienced, everything that I've seen my friends go through, and all of the different stuff that's positive that has happened that looks like Jesus, after all of that, I still question sometimes. I still have those days where I'm like, man, are you serious? You see, the thing that I realized is biblically, I'm actually in really good company. So there's this guy in the New Testament that happened, is mentioned in most of the Gospels, this guy named Thomas. And unfortunately, Thomas kind of has a bit of a bad rap. His name's almost turned into this derogatory insult, like a doubting Thomas, right? And I've always disliked this passage, and I think part of it is because of the way that it's been taught. And I think because I resonate with doubting Thomas a little more often than I would like to or care to admit. So normally what I do is I kind of break the passage down, and we go through it point by point. But today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're going to actually read the whole passage, and we're reading out of the Common English Bible. It is John 20, 24 through 31-ish. Okay, and it's Jesus appears to Thomas and the disciples. If you want to pull it up, like I said, it's John 20, 24 through 31. Thomas, the one called Didymus, which means twin, one of the 12, wasn't with the disciples when Jesus came. He's talking about on the Sunday afternoon where Jesus came back and met with the disciples, walked into the room. We're going to get to that in a minute. So the other disciples told Thomas, "We have seen the Lord." And Thomas replied, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger in the wounds left by the nails, and put my hand into his side, I won't believe." After 8 days, his disciples were again in a house, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus entered and stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." And then he turned and said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, look at my hands, put your hand into my side, no more disbelief, believe." And Thomas responded to Jesus appropriately, "My Lord, my God." And Jesus replied, "Do you believe because you see me? Happy are those who don't see and yet believe." See, Thomas Cruise says in his book, John, an Introduction and Commentary, "But the one who knew what was in a person met Thomas where he was and invited him to touch the nail prints in his hands and the spear wound in his side." This passage is, we tend to land really hard on this whole, 29, do you believe because you see me? Happy are those, blessed are those, in some translations, blessed are those who don't see and yet believe. And I've often heard this passage taught in a way where it's almost like Jesus is pointing the finger at him and scolding him. But in reality, like Colin Cruz says, he says, that Jesus met Thomas where he was at, where he was struggling at those moments. So Thomas has stood back and told off the disciples and said, "Unless these things happen, I will never believe." And Jesus says, "Look, here you go, believe." So to put this in the context, Jesus, immediately after resurrection, he goes and he meets people on that first day. So the first person, if you know your Bible, the first person that he meets is Mary Magdalene, and it's right out in the garden. So it specifically says that this was Easter Sunday, okay? And Mary was walking up to the tomb, and she saw it all pulled apart, and she was all freaking out. And then she sees this guy, and she starts talking to him, and it says Mary is the first human being Jesus chose to reveal himself to alive. And it says that she thought that he was a gardener. So she didn't believe at first either until Jesus revealed himself. And then the next one, miraculously, he appears to two disciples while they are walking to Emmaus. This is in Luke 24, 13 through 33. Emmaus is a small village that was roughly 7 miles from Jerusalem. And he actually goes on to say that he chides them for not believing what the prophets foretold regarding the Messiah, then explains to them all the biblical verses that pertain to him. And the two disciples didn't actually realize that it was Jesus until they sat down to eat with him, and their eyes were open, and then they realized, and then Jesus vanished out of their sight. And then the big one, and this is the first time that Jesus actually sits down and reveals himself to the people that were sitting at the Passover dinner. Okay, so in Luke 20:19, this is, like I said, this is the first time he's met the disciples in the Passover dinner. And Jesus shows up in the middle of a locked room and says, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you." And we're not going to jump ahead because I'm going to come back to this, but there's a few things that happen that are really important immediately after he says this, "So I am sending you." 8 days later, probably April 16th, after sunset, Jesus shows himself to the disciples who join him at the Passover meal, and this is the moment that Jesus speaks with Thomas. So there's something that I noticed when I was reading this that this is kind of part of where I got stuck. So Jesus is meeting all of these people along the way. Nobody knew it was him until he revealed himself, whatever that means. But the thing that I noticed is Jesus didn't just find a throne or build a throne and sit on it, right? He actually got up and went to the people and saw the people and met them where they were at, right? So you think about this whole idea of flailing in the dark that I was talking about this week, right? So Jesus actually says to Thomas, no more disbelief, believe. And he meets Thomas where he's at. So Jesus didn't find himself a throne. Jesus actually went out there and met people. John 20:29, Jesus replied, do you believe because you see me? Happy are those who don't see and yet believe. So let's digress for a second. Jesus goes and appears to the disciples on the first Sunday of his resurrection in the evening. So it was still the first day of the week that evening while the disciples were behind closed doors because they were afraid of the Jewish authorities. So they were hiding in a locked room to stay away from the Jews, the Jewish authorities who were persecuting them and coming after them after Jesus' death. So it says that Jesus came and stood among them. He said, peace be with you. And after he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. And when the disciples saw the Lord, they were filled with joy. But Thomas wasn't there. Thomas didn't see Jesus for another 8 days. He spent a week walking around listening to the disciples talk about seeing Jesus, right? An extra week struggling through all of his experience from the Friday before when Jesus died. An extra week with that torture that he witnessed Jesus go through, and an extra week living with the fact that his friend that he had followed for 3 years-ish was murdered. I can't imagine the level of anger and frustration Thomas must have felt after that. I can imagine, however, that I don't know if Thomas would have wanted to be in the presence of anybody else. I can get this sense that, or I get the sense, I should say, that Thomas probably tried to withdraw a little bit. So picture this for a second. Jesus shows himself to the disciples, and they are so happy and excited to go and see him. They are jumping for joy that their friend had come for dinner and all of this stuff. Thomas wasn't there, and the disciples told and went and found Thomas, and they told him and said, we've seen the Lord. Can you can you imagine the look on Thomas's face when the disciples, the other 9 of them, 10 of them, came up and said, we've seen the Lord, after just watching him being tortured for an entire day and then murdered and then buried in a tomb? So if you caption it that way, and you can think about what Thomas's face would have been like with the disciples coming up, it kind of changes the way that Thomas responds a little bit. I don't think that Thomas was overly calm when he said this. So unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger in the wounds left by the nails and put my hand in his side, I won't believe. I think it was more likely like that. I think he was probably pretty upset with the fact that his friends came and just told him this. But what I didn't talk about in that other passage before, where we finished, I'm just going back to it, where Jesus is meeting the disciples on Sunday afternoon, it says that Jesus actually gave them the Holy Spirit. So they had a one-up on top of Thomas at that moment because the Holy Spirit was now with them. It says that he breathed on them and sent them out to go and, on a mission with the Holy Spirit, right? That's the beginning of that. And Thomas doesn't know any of that yet. All he knows is that the disciples have seen the Lord. Like I said, I can imagine that Thomas was pretty upset. See, after witnessing that torture and that murder, it would be hard to say and look at your best friends and say, you mean to tell me that now you've seen Jesus? Thomas is working through that for 8 days before he comes to the point on Sunday, on the following Sunday on the 16th, when Jesus actually reveals himself to him. So to put this into context, Colin Cruz says that Thomas's refusal to believe is expressed using the double negative, showing he was adamant about this matter. It's the same way that Peter talks about, that the Bible refers to Peter's refusal to allow Jesus to wash his feet in John 13:8. See, Thomas is angry and frustrated and upset to the point where he is adamant that nothing will prove to him that they saw Jesus and Jesus was back. And Thomas sits like this for 8 days. Now, this is the same Thomas who, during the story earlier on in John, where we're around the time where Jesus is going to raise Lazarus from the dead, Jesus is talking about going to Jerusalem, and the disciples are trying to dissuade him from doing that because they know that they tried to stone Jesus in that place. They know that they tried to stone Jesus prior to this. And Thomas pipes up, this is John 11:16. Thomas pipes up and he says, "Then Thomas said to the other disciples, 'Let us go as well, so that we may die with Jesus.'" So Thomas loved Jesus and knew Jesus well enough to know that Jesus was going to go do what he wanted to do no matter what anybody said. And Thomas says, "Well, I'm going to go too, because if he's going to go, I'm going with him." Thomas knew who Jesus was. And Thomas was willing to lay down his life for Jesus. I think, and I can't speak for him personally or the other disciples, I think that Thomas was having a rough week and a rough weekend. And I think that if I was Thomas, if my best friends came to me and told me about this lovely dinner that they had with Jesus that I wasn't included in or I didn't go to, I'd be kind of pissed off, to be honest with you. So my problem with this passage that we talked about, the John 20, where, the doubting Thomas passage, most of the commentaries, or some of the commentaries anyways, that I talk about, that I read anyways, they see this as this opportunity for Jesus to put Thomas in his place, right? So I struggle with this condemning Jesus story, especially with his friend who was just struggling. That narrative doesn't fit with me, and the more I thought about it, the less I like the way that I've heard this taught before, and the less I have enjoyed the passage. Until I come across this commentary in the Bible software that I use, and something struck me a little bit, right? If we change the way that we see this narrative of Jesus speaking to Thomas, and we stop it from this, right, where Jesus is scolding him, and we instead sit down, and we're not allowed to do it here because of COVID, but we have this idea of Jesus sitting down beside Thomas and holding his hands and saying, "It's okay. Some people can believe without seeing. You may not be that person, and that's okay. I'm here. I'm with you. It's okay." If we change it from scolding Jesus to caring Jesus and loving Jesus, all of a sudden that conversation now fits with what I've read before in the Bible. It isn't this, blessed are those who believe without seeing, because you're an idiot and you're blind. It's, no, hold on a second. Yes, those people are blessed. It's okay that they're blessed. And it's also okay that you're not blessed in that way. It's okay that you may struggle. Because don't worry, I'm going to come meet you where you are. And that's what Jesus does. He sits down and what's his name? This guy, Kenneth Gangle, he said in the Holman New Testament commentary, he says, but John moved on in the story. John moved on to show us doubting alleviated. So he goes on to show us that the doubt has been removed from Thomas's eyes. Despite what he said, Thomas at least joined the Sunday evening service a week later. Again, despite locked doors, Jesus appeared and greeted them exactly as he had the week earlier with the other disciples. But rather than showing his hands and side to the entire group that's there, he turns to Thomas, essentially grasps him by his hands, okay, and invites him into what Kenneth Gangle calls empirical investigation. He's basically telling Thomas, touch me, I'm here, I am with you, I'm not distant. Sincere Christianity has always welcomed sincere research. Jesus did not scold Thomas or condemn his hesitation. He provided the evidence. Only then did he say to him, stop doubting and believe. He met Thomas there and said, look, I'm with you, it's okay. You see, some people have an easier time believing in Jesus and what he did and who he was, and other people struggle, and some people struggle with their faith being questioned or questioning their own faith. And to be honest with you, like we've had for the last year and maybe even the last week or the last 24 hours for some of us, it's really difficult and maybe sometimes almost impossible for us to see Jesus when we're in the middle of the deep shit, right? And to be honest with you, it's just as bad, and it's a little too easy for me anyways to lose faith when I'm in the middle of that stuff. It's really easy for me to just kind of go, oh, geez, like, really? And I think Thomas felt some of that guilt when he sat there and questioned Jesus. Can you imagine sitting there having Jesus hold your hands and say to you, don't worry, I'm here. You can touch me, you can see. I wonder if what Thomas said 8 days beforehand was ringing in his head. And I think that moment of doubt being alleviated from Jesus from Thomas when Jesus touched him and spoke with him. Thomas stood up and said, my God, my Lord, my God. That must have been a huge relief for him. So, the question that I'd like to leave you with this week is this. It's been a rough year. Has your faith been challenged over this last year? It's okay if it has. Mine has. I've struggled looking at some of the stuff and wondering where Jesus is, and so I've even caught myself inventing things. Oh, that's Jesus right there. You know what I mean? To try and make myself feel better about it. When your faith was challenged, how did that make you feel? Did you, like me, did you feel guilty about questioning those times? Did you feel angry with yourself for feeling guilty about those times where you questioned? Did you feel at any point in time during that guilt, did you feel Jesus holding your hands and comforting you? It's been hard because the last year we haven't been able to interact with people that we would normally be able to and gain some comfort from that. I'm lucky that I have family. There's so many people around that have nobody right now. I know I haven't always felt Jesus holding my hands trying to comfort me. I've had to try and read and find that and figure it out on my own sometimes. If one of Jesus' closest friends was struggling to believe that Jesus had returned, after everything that he saw, all the other miracles that he saw, all of the amazing things that he witnessed, all of the teachings that Jesus taught, if Thomas, one of Jesus' closest friends, was struggling to see him and believe him, do you think it might be fair to give yourself a pass? I've had to give myself a pass. To be honest with you, if I'm being completely honest, I've had to give other people a pass. Because I haven't felt grace-filled lately. I've been struggling with that. But Jesus sat down with Thomas and let him hold his hands to make sure that Thomas knew he was there. He says, put your finger here, look at my hands, put your hand into my side, no more disbelief, believe. So I ask you today, where are you struggling, and who do you need to reach out to see Jesus again? So I'm going to get the worship team to come back up. I'm going to quickly pray, and then we will say goodbye for the day.